So, last time I made one of these videos, it seemed to be quite liked, so I thought I'd do another one because there are many trivial boarding school stories to dive into. So, many people know the popular song I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. It's a classic. But whenever I sing it in my head, I am singing a different version because of what I learnt at school. I can't remember if we learnt this in an assembly or some kind of actual lesson, but we had a kind of PSA on food hygiene and food poisoning. And part of that was showing us a song that was a remix of I Will Survive, but the lyrics were rewritten around the subject of food poisoning. I can't remember all the lyrics, but it went something along the lines of Listeria don't scare me, nor does nasty E. coli. Hey, salmonella. Did you think I'd lay down and die? Oh no, not I. I will survive. Absolutely terrible, but it's ingrained in my head forever, luckily. I tried to find it so that I could link it below or insert a clip, but I couldn't find anything. I didn't really know what to search either. The only thing I could find were cupcake remixes, so not really appropriate. So at school, we would have a lot of talks. They were kind of like these assemblies, but they would happen in the evening, like last chunk of the day, usually finishing at like 5:30, 6:30-ish. And so we would all go into one of the studios, which was like a studio theatre. It had the pull-out seating. We would all clamor in. Sometimes we'd have to wear our real school uniform, like full blazers and shirts and everything, as opposed to what we would normally wear, which was our dance tracksuits. So sometimes they weren't that fun. At the end of a long day of dancing and just feeling really tired and awful, having to get dressed up again and look smart and go and sit and watch a talk that is keeping you from dinner wasn't always the best. Now, obviously there were some good speakers and like some educational things happening, but there were also some not good speakers. There were just some subjects or things that we had to sit through that weren't that engaging, I hate to say it. For a room full of young people who are extremely tired, not that engaging. And every time this happened, there would always be the same thing going on at the end. The hectic rush to dinner. As soon as it got to the last 5 minutes of the talk, there was a certain tension in the room that you could feel. Everyone literally was on the edge of their seat, getting ready to sprint out of the studio and run like Usain Bolt to the canteen. So let's say the talk finishes at 6. It's 5:55. Suddenly, you notice people who had taken their shoes off before, quietly slipping them back on. You notice people slowly shuffling towards the edge of their seat, kind of angling themselves in the direction to get ready to run. It got to the point where you would get to the talk early enough so that you could pick your seat and make sure that you were in a place that was convenient for an exit, because you had to plan your exit strategy. If you wanted to get to dinner first, you had to have every step of the way planned out. We'd all be on the edge of our seats. In the last 5 minutes, typically, they would open it up to questions and ask the student body if any of us had questions, and we'd all kind of just sit there like, no. Truly, the only question on people's minds was, can we leave yet? Finally, the moment would come. You would be dismissed. Suddenly, like a swarm, like a flames on the side of my head. It would be like a swarm of rats, a swarm of locusts suddenly just boom. Like you see everybody frantically running out of the room as if like a gunshot had just gone off. And we would all make our way out, and you would see just a horde of children dashing across the front lawn of the building. Because where these talks took place, it was on the opposite side of the campus to the canteen. It was truly a struggle. Like you literally had to go run around the entire campus to get to where you wanted to be. I remember running so fast, I truly thought in that moment I could be in the Olympics. I also just felt terrified that I was gonna like fall flat on my face, because running at that speed, like let me tell you, the injuries would not have been good. I would have needed a whole reconstruction from the way I would have slammed into the concrete. The reason why there was such a rush was because basically, usually meals were staggered at school. For lunch, it was set times for year groups to come in. For breakfast, everyone kind of got up and would arrive to the canteen at different times anyway. And then for dinner, usually not all the year groups were finishing at exactly the same time, and people would kind of make their way over whenever they wanted. But because these talks made us all finish as late as we could, and then we all had the same hour slot to get in and eat, it was every man for himself. That's why everyone would rush like that, because if you just leisurely strolled over to the canteen, didn't think about it, took your time, you would get there and the queue would be ridiculous. You'd have to wait 45 minutes probably, and then only have 15 minutes to eat. And by that point, they're wanting to try and clean stuff up, and there's not actually that much food left. You're going to have less options than the people who are at the front of the queue. And again, like I said, after a long day of dancing and feeling tired, you want to eat as soon as you possibly can instead of having to stand in a queue for however long. It was always chaotic, but it was an adrenaline rush that I haven't experienced since, to be honest. Next story. This took place when I was in year 8, and the boys and girls were together in the studio. We were rehearsing like a new ballet that was being created at the time for year 7, 8, and 9. There was one teacher rehearsing it with us and going through it with us. So the teacher gives corrections or whatever, and then we get ready to kind of run this like section again. And so she goes to start the music and she's like, okay, are we ready? And one of the boys in my class, under his breath, says, as always, even though he said this very quietly under his breath, like most of the people in the room didn't even hear him say that, she somehow heard it. So she turns around and she says, who said as always? And most of us don't know what she's talking about because we didn't even hear him say it. And so we all just kind of stand there like lemons, looking around thinking, what's she talking about? And then she asks again, she's like, who said as always? Again, crickets. And so she says, right, we're not gonna start again until whoever said that owns up. And so we stand there in silence for 84 years. Like, we were stood there for, I want to say, a good 15 minutes in silence because nobody owned up and pretty much no one had any idea what she was talking about. And so literally we wasted 15 minutes of a lesson just standing around in silence, all of us with our arms crossed like, okay. So we all just stand there. And eventually she realizes, like, okay, maybe I should just move on because at this point we're just losing rehearsal time. So obviously there were different house parents on duty on different days. And so that meant that when they would wake you up in the morning or say goodnight, you got very different types of greetings depending on who you had on that day. So in the morning, they would come into our rooms and turn our lights on. The big light, mind you. And, you know, anyone who knows me knows I have a huge problem with big overhead lighting. So when they would wake us up in the morning, they would come in, and some people were kind of aggressive with it. Like, they'd give you no warning, just morning, light on, bam, like blinding eyes, flames on the side of my head. And then there was like one house parent who was really quite shy and timid, and she would almost sort of like creep into the room, be like, morning boys, and just, I'm gonna turn the light on now and just flick it on. And she would do the same thing at night too, just like kind of peek behind the door as little as she possibly had to, just to like, good night. To be honest though, I did prefer that in the morning because an aggressive, no warning, no warming up, no preparation for the big light, not okay at all. Alright, that's a more trivial boarding school lore. I hope you enjoyed. Again, there's like probably so much stuff. There's stuff that I'm probably not even remembering right now. But as soon as you get me in a room with a group of my friends from school and we just like talk it over, like so many things come up. So I'm sure I will make another one of these again in future. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Goodbye. I tried to find it, but anyways.